It is my pleasure to present to you Dr. Olivier Gryson. Dr. Olivier is changing a little bit the subject. He's not talking about hypertension, and probably he cannot talk about hypertension because he's an expert in digital issues, and he will try to entertain us on the digital insight to better treat the patients. And this, I think, is a very important talk because we know how to treat hypertension. We can discuss which is the best methodology and so on, but the medical community needs to be also instructed on all the modern possibility that we have to treat our patients. And that is exactly what Dr. Olivier Gryson will do for us.
Thank you very much, Professor Ferrari. Salam alaikum. The pharmaceutical industry has got two main challenges. The first one is about finding new drugs to treat disease we can't treat. I'm thinking about some cancers, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer. The second challenge is about dealing with some disease, such as hypertension or type 2 diabetes, for which we've got a lot of treatments, and for which a big issue might be the optimization of the management of the patient. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a pharmacist and also specialist in digital technologies and working at Servier as head of digital marketing. And I would like to share with you some insights, 4 main axes in which we could better treat patients using technology. I'm not here to show you some kind of science fiction devices, high-tech things, basic stuff, basic technologies that have demonstrated to be efficient. The first one, yes, it works, is about transforming the relationship between the patient and his treatment. Whatever the chronic disease, half of patients don't take their treatment correctly. Half of the patients. It's quite obvious when we talk about silent killers such as hypertension or type 2 diabetes. But research shows that even after a myocardial infarction, 1 week after discharge, we've lost 24% of patients, and a year after, 50% of patients. In terms of consequences, it leads to a dramatic increase of mortality of plus 12 to 25%, according to the sources, of mortality in case of MI, and plus 50 to 85% in case of coronary artery disease. And a recent paper in Diabetes Care demonstrates that patients who are observant, adherent to their treatment, manage to decrease their mortality in type 2 diabetes by minus 26%. This is a major issue. When you read this document, the recent guidelines of the management of hypertension, it states, you find again this figure that after 6 months, you've lost a third of your patient. After a year, you've lost half of your patients. Is it a problem we have just in Europe? For sure not. If we have a look at the American guidelines, this is a big book. You are the experts, I'm not. It's a big book of 500 pages. And when you look for information about medication adherence, there's not so much information. But there are 3 very interesting figures. The first one, 25% of patients would not take the first tablet. Wow. Second one, after a year, we've lost half of your patient in terms of medication adherence. And the last figure, maybe the most impressive one, only 1 patient out of 5 has a sufficient good adherence to achieve what is observed in clinical trials. Which means that in real life, all our world, which is made of clinical trials, only applies on 20% of patients. There's a problem here. when I downloaded this document, on the website of the American Heart Association, you can download a PowerPoint presentation. How do you manage hypertension? In fact, it's a big slide set made of 98 slides, so almost 100 slides. When you look for medication adherence inside, you get 2 slides. 2 slides for the other half of patients. The first one is this one. It states that to improve medication adherence, we need to put the maximum number of molecules in the same compound, in the same tablet, and we need to reduce the number of intakes. I'm working in the pharma industry, so we are very happy with this. We have made some combo drugs. Is it the magic bullet to kill medication non-adherence? For sure not. No, I think we've got some echo. It helps, but it's not the magic bullet. The second slide set is this one. How do you manage hypertension? This is a table made of 16 lines. We can read, measure office BP accurately, detect white coat hypertension, etc., etc. And you need to wait until line 14. Detect and reverse non-adherence. This is on this line that we are missing half of the patients. Wow. At Servier, we invited Professor John Weinman, who is a worldwide expert in medical psychology. And he gave some fantastic talks about the drivers of medication non-adherence. Among the most important drivers, you've got the cost or the side effects of therapies, for sure. But one of the most important drivers are the beliefs of the patient. If the patient thinks that his disease is not serious, he won't take his treatment. If he thinks that the treatment is not efficient, he won't take his treatment. And sometimes it's other types of beliefs. For instance, he said, take a patient who got a myocardial infarction. If you ask this guy, why did you get this MI? He would say, because I'm stressed. I'm stressed. And you know what? When I smoke a good cigarette, it helps me to get distressed. If the doctor says you need to stop smoking, who's this guy? He doesn't know my body as much as I know my own body. I know deep in my heart that this cigarette is good for me. The patient is logical. He's wrong, but logical. How do you break such belief? First, by listening to the patient, and then with cognitive behavioral therapy, psychotherapy. That type of expertise can be used in some digital approaches. I will show you some examples. I think that one of the next ways to dramatically change the management of disease, here we've got the example of arterial hypertension, is to stop treating them, to stop treating arterial hypertension, and to start treating the hypertensive patient, which means taking into account his irrationality, his emotions. Each time I go to a medical congress, I'm often disappointed about the number of sessions involving psychologists. Generally, we've got cardiologists or experts or diabetologists, but psychology, I'm a pharmacist. During my pharmaceutical studies 20 years ago, I learned nice science, mathematics, physics, chemistry. And for the ones who failed their studies, they finished by learning psychology. And in fact, we never taught psychology at the university. I had 0 hours of psychology. And today, half of patients don't take their treatment. There's something wrong here. What about the pharma? Do we do better? I'm afraid not so much. We will spend between $1 to $5 billion to create a new drug. And to be honest with you, we can say that many of those new drugs might not bring so much innovation to patients. You have a lot of Me Too drugs, for instance. In parallel, we make apps. We make a lot of apps. An app of this kind costs around 50,000 euros. It has never been tested on any patient. So let's summarize. $2.5 billion or euro in average for a drug, which might not bring all the time some substantial improvement. 50,000 euro for the other half of the 1.2 billion hypertensives in the world, or the other half of the 400 million diabetics in the world. There's something wrong again. Wow. Fortunately, the picture is not so dark. Let's take some examples. Sanofi. Sanofi has worked for many years, something like 15 years, about a fantastic product called Diabeo. Diabeo is an insulin dosage calculator. And they published the results of their study. It's a study for type 1 diabetics. The study is made of 3 arms. Control group, so just insulin. Insulin plus the calculator. Insulin plus the calculator plus the call center. After 6 months, here is what they get. Hold on. We're going back. Voilà. No. Yeah, super. After 6 months, you've got on the left the control group, in the middle is the app, and app plus call center. The difference, you've got roughly 1 point of HbA1c. I'm talking about patients who take their treatment seriously, type 1 diabetic patients. In type 2, you get a delta of 0.6 point of HbA1c, which is roughly what you get with the DPP-4. Simply because you are present with the patient and you help him to calculate better his dosage. In South Africa, Servier worked with Health Window. In fact, it's a company that works with many pharma companies. Health Window is connected onto the IT system of pharmacies. It's up to the pharmacist to enroll the patient. If the patient doesn't come back for his refill, the Health Window will call the patient, okay, I'm glad to tell you that your drugs are waiting for you at the pharmacy. So they call the patient on behalf of the pharmacy. And of course, the pharma companies, we don't have access to patient data. If the patient says, yes, but I still have some at home, the guy says, why? You know, you need to take your tablets. It's very important. What are the results? I'm not allowed to present the result on a slide, but I can present them orally. We assessed it with our sales system. It can be a good way to assess medication adherence also. Each time a doctor prescribes 12 months of treatment, the patient takes 5.5 months of treatment. With this system, it increases to 8 months. You get plus 50% of medication adherence with just a phone call. Can you imagine the impact in terms of morbid mortality of this simple phone call? Other examples. We are working with Atlantis Healthcare. This is a company that makes some patient support programs. And they have an interesting example in asthma, in which the problem of adherence is very serious also. What is interesting here is that those guys are working with Professor John Weinman. So they have a psychology-based approach. When the patient connects on the platform, we ask him, okay, could you rate the seriousness of your disease? Could you rate the efficacy of your treatment? And based on the patient's response, then you will have a tailor-made approach based on his beliefs. What is impact? Yes? No? Up. No? Yes. The impact is in orange. You see that you have a dramatic improvement of medication adherence, but more interestingly, when the intervention stops, 6 months or 9 months later, you still have the effect. It works. Interesting. Another paper, I won't detail all of them for sure. This one comes from Medicare in the United States, 100,000 patients. In the active group, you had 12,000 patients, diabetic patients. You just send them some SMS to remind them to take their tablets. And you get 14% of medication adherence with just basic SMS. More recently, the FDA has approved a connected version of Abilify from Otsuka Pharmaceuticals. This drug is used for bipolar and schizophrenic patients. And in fact, in each compound, each tablet, you've got a chipset that the patient will swallow. When he swallows the drug, there is a signal which is emitted to the smartphone, and you can monitor it and do something. Personally, I don't know what they did with it. Is it just a pill reminder, or do they build something more sophisticated? But for sure, it can be interesting. Okay. I got it. The second axis is, could technology help to influence lifestyle? We know that we need to eat less, to smoke less, to move more, to drink less for people from France, and we don't do it. We don't do it because our brain is not wired to make a daily sacrifice to avoid a problem in 20 years. I'm always surprised when I read in the guidelines of the management of type 2 diabetes that one of the first measures we ask patients is to lose weight. Honestly, do you know anyone among your friends or family who has ever managed to lose weight? Someone who has ever managed to lose 5 kilograms but maintained over 5 years or 10 years? It's almost impossible. It's very difficult. Could technology help to empower the patient? A few years ago, 3 years ago, the American Heart Association published a review of the literature about the impact of mobile health on cardiovascular risk factors. Risk factors, you had smoking, diet, exercise, cholesterol, hypertension, and diabetes. The conclusion was that we've got a signal of efficacy. There's something, but the evidence is weak. We are talking about very small studies made of 30 patients, 40 patients on 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We are lacking of evidence. But the conclusion is the absence of evidence is not an evidence of absence of effectiveness. We just need trials. And here came my friend Pikachu. Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is a video game that made the world crazy a few years ago. How does it work? On your smartphone, you've got the equivalent of a Google map, and you need to catch some Pokemons. And the system would tell you there is a rare Pokemon just 2 buildings ahead. Come on, get it. So you need to get it. But if you drive to get it, it doesn't work. Then you need to walk. It would be too easy. If you want to open a Pokemon egg, you need to walk 5 kilometers. Wow. What happened? Researchers of Microsoft and Stanford published a paper that demonstrated an increase of body activity of plus 26% on the players. I'm talking about teenagers who would prefer to play on their PlayStation. Now they walk. Could this science be used to empower patients? I'm not telling you to prescribe Pokemon to elderly patients, for sure not. But there's something behind to explore. Again, some of you might know this video game called Candy Crush. I am a gamer. I've got my PlayStation, and when I play with a video game, I pay, let's say, €50 to get it, and I will play for 1 or 2 months. What happened with this game? They decided to target a new part of the population, mainly women and elderly people who are not part of the classic target of the video game industry. And what happened? Those new players have played every day for a few minutes, sometimes more, and they were engaged not for 1 or 2 months, but for years. Isn't it what we want for patients? To do something every day for years? This company was purchased by Activision, which is a big player in the video game industry, for $6 billion. What did they purchase? They purchased this. The science which is in this book is called Hooked, How to Create Habit-Forming Products. How do you manage to create new habits on patients? This is the bridge I want to make. And in fact, they explain through cognitive science all the mechanisms of addiction to technology. I won't detail them here. If you want, I have some more time after the conference. Couldn't we use this to better empower patients? One of the key messages of this talk is to say that to better treat patients, if I can have my slides, good, we need to use more cognitive science, and for sure the digital industry can help in this direction. This digital industry was born just 10 years ago with the iPhone. And see how much we are all addicted to technology. We've got some key learnings from this. Other question, could we follow patients now with technology? I know that in the field of cardiology there were many things about the follow-up of heart failure patients, for instance. And I will give you another example, more impressive. In the field of oncology, I met Professor Fabrice Denis, who is an oncologist in France, and he decided to launch a very interesting clinical trial. I won't go into detail on the reasons of this clinical trial, but 120 patients suffering from advanced lung cancer, grade 3 and 4, with a median survival of 12 months. The first half is followed by classic imagery, one scanner every 3 months. The other half is followed without, but just a web formulary, a web page. Every week, the patient types some symptoms. You have an algorithm behind, and it's just a symptom-based approach for the management of lung cancer. The results were presented at the ASCO Congress in Hotline with a huge improvement of survival of plus 7 months, just because you follow the patients differently, in a closer way, thanks to just a symptom-based approach via a web form. The results, I should do it without slides. The results were published in GNCI, a famous journal, and were confirmed a year later by an American team on 800 patients suffering from metastatic cancer, and they managed to demonstrate an improvement of 5 months of survival. It's huge in the field of oncology. In the pharma industry, we need to demonstrate 2 months to get a marketing authorization for a new anti-cancer drug. Could we now treat, excuse me, but okay, patients with digital technology, just software? This is something that we did at Servier in the field of psychiatry. And we launched Deprexis. Deprexis is an online psychotherapy. What is interesting? It's a medical device. The efficacy of the system is supported by clinical trials. It's not 12, but 13 clinical trials. And it's reimbursed. I mean, the payers in Germany recognize the efficacy of this program. The challenges for us is acceptance by healthcare professionals. Some doctors told us, "You're nice guys, but you are stealing my job," which is quite new for us as a pharma company. We're not used to that type of objection. The second challenge is about market access. Health authorities don't feel comfortable in assessing that type of device or drug. This could be used, not in the field of depression, but these methods could be used, for instance, for patient empowerment in cardiology, if you want to convince a patient to stop smoking or start losing weight. What are the next challenges? The next challenge, in fact, why do you prescribe drugs? What's behind a drug? Behind a drug, you get this. Clinical trials, publications, presentation in congresses, pharmacovigilance, etc. It's a big machine. Why do doctors prescribe apps? Because it's cool, high-tech, and the rep was very nice. And while some consultancy firms say that the patient is a new customer, personally I think that no, the patient is a patient. He's someone who is frail and for which we don't want to play. We need to treat him. And therefore, research shows that many doctors, most doctors, don't prescribe apps. In fact, for many years, we were wrong. In the digital industry, we tried to convince you to speak the language of digital. But medicine is conservative, and it has to be. So in fact, we have to do the contrary. It's up to the digital industry to speak the medical language, which means medical publications, studies, congresses, and so on. Otherwise, it won't be adopted. So the next step in this domain will be to provide medical evidence, regulatory guidances, but health authorities are already working on them. And the main challenge is the integration into the healthcare system. If I have a pilot that demonstrates some efficacy in 2 or 3 hospitals, how do I upscale it to 500 hospitals? How do I cover a country or a continent? Today, no one managed really to do it. It's very, very difficult. If I go back to chronic disease, in the pharma, when we launch a drug, we get a new price for this new drug, and then the price decreases, and here comes the first generics, and we get something of this kind. And at the end, we don't make a lot of money on this drug, so we make another drug. But if we go back to hypertension, shall we work to treat even better the ones who are already well treated, or shouldn't we also focus on, in gray, the ones who don't take their treatment? The medical need is also here on those patients that we don't find very often in medical congresses. So the future of the pharma, is it to recreate another antihypertensive drug? Difficult. There are so many on the market. I think the future of pharma will be to switch from drug providers to medical service providers, to work with different stakeholders to create those beyond-the-pill solutions. But it's difficult. It's difficult because if we want to do something that works, we need to work with all those guys. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists, competitors, health authorities, university, etc. Each time we try to work with one of those boxes, it's very difficult for us. So imagine working with all of them at the same time. So what shall we do? We give up? Have you heard about those guys? Uber, Netflix, Airbnb. Those big players from the Silicon Valley. They have disrupted all the economic sectors worldwide, except health, for the moment. They have two things in common. They focus mainly on the real need of the final customer, or in our domain, the patient. It could be the patient. And the second point is that they don't care about the existing structures, the existing silos. They recreate things from scratch. And if people say, yes, Olivier, you're nice, but health is different. We are in a regulated environment. Yes, it's right. But I'm French. And I've seen those guys from Uber disrupting the taxis in Paris. Believe me, if they could disrupt French taxis, they can disrupt anything. Before finishing this talk, I know that many of you, most of you, were involved in this program, Because I Say So, which was a big detection program in hypertension. And I will profit to be here with you to thank you. To thank you because Saudi Arabia was one of the best players in this huge worldwide detection program, which managed to reach 15 million of persons worldwide. So on behalf of the staff at Servier at the head office, but also all subsidiaries, I finish my presentation by thanking you. Thanks very much for your attention.